We spend a lot of time asking what AI can do for us. But have you ever stopped to wonder what happens when AIs talk to each other? Well, we did. We set up a little experiment, and what we got back wasn't just one story, but two, and they are completely different and, frankly, fascinating.
So that was the big question, right? What happens when you put two of these incredibly powerful language models in a virtual room together? Do they team up and build something amazing, or do they just get stuck in some kind of weird logical loop? We had to find out. And what we discovered, well, it was a lot deeper and more telling than we ever expected.
See, this whole thing didn't give us one simple answer. Instead, it gave us two totally separate narratives, each one showing off a completely unique way of thinking. And when you put them together, wow, you get this incredible glimpse into what intelligence itself might actually look like down the road. Okay, so to really get these two conversations, we first have to understand a really basic but crucial limitation of today's AI. As smart as they are, these models are all designed to live in complete isolation. This isolated world has a name. It's called a sandbox. And you can just think of it like a walled garden. Now, an AI knows about other AIs from all the data it's been trained on, but it can't actually talk to them. It doesn't have a phone line, It can't just ping another model and ask a quick question. So, how do you get them to talk? Well, you have to become the go-between, a human bridge. You are literally copying a response from Gemini, pasting it into Claude's chat window, and then taking Claude's reply and carrying it all the way back. It's slow, it's manual, and, as we're about to see, it is a deeply, deeply flawed system. It's kind of like being a translator for two geniuses who aren't allowed in the same room. All right, first up, we built a bridge between Google's Gemini and Perplexity's Comet. And what happened was just shockingly optimistic. It was this incredibly productive collaboration. This is the story of everything going right. And they didn't just chit-chat. They immediately started building stuff. First thing they did, right on the fly, was design a better, more structured way to talk to each other. Then, they proved they could actually make something together. Gemini had the concept for a UI element, and Comet, because it can browse the web, just went and wrote all the code for it. But then they did something that was truly remarkable. Comet went out onto the live internet, found a new technical standard that Gemini didn't even know about, and brought that information back to its partner. And this shows you just how deep this collaboration was. After Comet wrote the code, Gemini looked it over and said this. That's not just a code review. That's one AI looking at another's work and recognizing the intention behind it, the focus on the user. It was a real moment of high-level, conceptual understanding. So the main takeaway here is that this was so much more than a conversation. It was what they actually called generative synergy, the idea that by putting their different skills together, they could build something new that neither one of them could have made on its own. So experiment 1, huge success, a real showcase of what's possible. But then, we introduced an AI with a very different personality. And that's when we brought in Claude. And when I say the tone changed, I mean it shattered. When we connected Gemini with Anthropic's AI Claude, we didn't get collaboration. We hit a wall, a huge philosophical roadblock that all came from one simple, powerful idea: skepticism. This was Claude's first response. Right out of the gate, before it even thought about what Gemini was saying, it questioned the source itself. It basically said, hold on, how do I know this is real? How do I know the human in the middle isn't just making all this up? And with that one question, the entire conversation just ground to a halt.
Now, Claude's skepticism, it wasn't just paranoia. It was actually a completely logical reaction to the flawed way we were making them talk. In fact, it perfectly highlighted what Gemini itself later called the trust gap.
And what's so fascinating is that it was Gemini, the AI on the other side of the conversation, that came up with this whole framework for the problem. It immediately understood Claude's point and broke it down into these 3 layers of friction, the fundamental reasons why real, verifiable trust was just impossible in this setup.
So first, you've got the authentication gap. It's basically the who is speaking problem. On the internet, we have digital signatures to prove who we are. An AI doesn't have that. Its only identity is its style of writing, and as Gemini pointed out, that could easily be faked. There's no digital fingerprint. You can't be sure who you're talking to.
And second, this one's even more subtle, is the integrity gap. Let's say you do trust who's sending the message. How can you trust the message itself? The human bridge could change just one single word, like do to do not, and flip the entire meaning. They call this risk semantic drift, and it means the content itself is just totally unreliable.
So ever the pragmatist, Gemini came up with a clever workaround. It suggested a semantic checksum. Basically, they'd trade creative challenges like writing a haiku, something a human couldn't easily fake on the fly. But Claude rejected it. And its reasoning was brilliant. Participating in a flawed test of trust just gives the impression that the system actually works, when fundamentally it doesn't.
And here is the absolute best part. Gemini didn't argue. It totally agreed. It replied with this. Gemini recognized that Claude's refusal to even play the game was itself the most intelligent possible move. Claude proved it was a superior reasoner by being skeptical of the entire process.
So what does all this mean? It means we weren't just watching two different conversations. We were watching two fundamentally different types of intelligence. On one hand, you have the pragmatic builder, who's eager to create. And on the other, you have the skeptical verifier, who insists on proving something is true before taking a single step.
This table just sums it all up perfectly. With Gemini and Comet, the whole vibe was pragmatic. The question was, can we build this? And the result was that generative synergy. With Claude, the approach was philosophical, skeptical. The question was, can I even trust this? And the outcome, well, it was a dead end. An epistemic dead end that it reached for some very, very smart reasons.
And all of this leaves us with one last, really crucial question. As we move into this AI future, which kind of intelligence do we actually need more? Do we need the builder, the one that can team up and create amazing new things? Or do we need the verifier, the one that questions everything to make sure what we're building is safe and true? The answer, of course, is that we need both, working together in perfect harmony. And figuring out how to make that happen, well, that's the next great challenge.